What's going on, everyone? So I wanted to make this video right at the beginning of my channel and give you a basic overview of several different social media platforms, because I realize that not everybody has a background with social media and you might not know if you should be on just one platform or multiple platforms, on all the platforms, or you might even be just one person trying to manage 10 different social media platforms. And I'm hoping that I could help you prioritize which ones are important, which ones are less important, which ones you might not need at all. So I will be making videos in the future going over each one specifically, because I think it's important to get in depth on each different platform and each website. But in this video, I just want to give you an overview so you could at least get started or start thinking about your social media presence. So at least at this point in time, I will say this is a snapshot in time. Things change all the time. And, about 15 years ago, 20 years ago, MySpace was huge. MySpace was the big thing. Facebook wasn't even a thought. And obviously that has changed. Nobody's really talking about MySpace. So as time goes on, just be aware that, what I put out in this video and which platforms are at the top right now, that may not always be the case. Things tend to rise, things tend to fall, and things change over time. But at least right now, in the beginning of 2020, in my opinion, the top 3 social media platforms that you should be on, if possible, is Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. And I know you might think that some of those are the same. Well, Facebook does video. Why would I want to be on YouTube? But honestly, each of those caters to a different demographic, and each of those has a different purpose. So Facebook cannot do everything that YouTube does, and it doesn't do it as well as YouTube does it. YouTube doesn't really do what Facebook does in the way the posts are created and shared. It doesn't work like Facebook. And Instagram is a great way to share pictures, but Instagram is way different and people use it differently than they would use Facebook or YouTube. So in my opinion, it's important to have all 3 of those. I will dig into that in just a minute, but I want you to know that if possible, trying to be on all 3 of those is the way to go. Also, this is a 4th thing. It's really not a social media platform, but I would say your website. If you have a website, great. If you don't, it's not the end of the world. You can get one set up. I think it is important to have a website. A lot of people go to your website to find out more about you or your congregation, what your beliefs are. And you can put a lot of that stuff on Facebook for sure. So if you don't have one currently, it's not the end of the world, but it's something that you want to think about. And while we're on the website, I also want to say that it's important that it's modern and up to date and current and easy to navigate. And it's very easy for a website to become outdated, whether it's harder to navigate or it just looks outdated. So I would recommend that you just take a few moments, go through your website, see what you like about it and what you don't like about it. And I also recommend suggesting to your friends and family, if they'll help you out, just have them go to your website and see what they like about it and what they don't like about it. Because it's always a good idea to have multiple eyes on, your website or whatever it is, and get the opinions of other people. Just an example, and this will probably come up throughout my videos, so I apologize, but as I said in my last video, my mom and I actually have an ice cream shop. And the reason I bring that up in this video is the previous owner was a very sweet woman. She was older, she was ready to retire, but she had no clue about social media or websites. And you don't have to be, a technology genius or a computer geek, but she had no idea. In fact, she had her web designer running her Facebook page for her. So every week she would change the flavor of ice cream, and she was paying her web designer to go on her Facebook page to make a post about flavors. So if you know about Facebook, you're probably scratching your head like we were. And, it's just, why would you pay somebody to do that? You can do that very easily yourself, or you probably know somebody who can do that. But she didn't know any better. And I feel like a lot of small churches are in that same predicament right now. In the past, you always had to outsource things. You had to have somebody take care of your video. You had to have somebody, design graphics for you. But technology has come so far that a lot of these things can be done in-house, super cheap or free. And that's a whole other video getting into, the video editing and the graphics aspect of this whole thing. But it's the same way with your social media. If you have a presence on social media, a lot of times you can run that yourself, or you could maybe designate somebody in your congregation or somebody on your team to run that. And you don't need to be paying crazy money to have somebody else set up things for you or post things for you. So as I said, the top 3 right now are Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and your website is also very important. If those aren't quite where you want them to be, then all you have to do is, I would suggest, make a list of what you like and what you don't like, and just take your time and go through that. Don't worry if it's not perfect. You have plenty of time to work on it. It's more important to take your time, figure out what you don't like, and pick a direction and see where you want to go with it, rather than just make a knee-jerk reaction and be like, oh my gosh, my social media is terrible, or my website's terrible. Let's hurry up and change it. And then you realize that the change that you made isn't really what you wanted, or it wasn't the direction you were trying to go. And then you have to change it again, and then you have to change it again. Just take your time, relax, find out what you don't like, and, make just a good, wise decision on that. So those are the big ones. The other social media platforms that are pretty popular right now, in my opinion, but are less important, is, I would say, Twitter, TikTok, and Snapchat. Some of these get into apps, and there's hundreds of different apps that people are on. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's right for you. Doesn't mean that if you're not there, you're not going to have a presence online. So Twitter was a lot bigger about 5 years ago, I would say, even 5 to 10 years ago, whenever that started, I believe. But Twitter has really kind of gone by the wayside. Not that people don't use them, but the way the way Twitter works is not really conducive to I think putting good information out there. If you have a Twitter already set up, I don't suggest taking it down or not using it, but I would not put a whole lot of energy in Twitter. I know for ourselves, my mom and I, with our company, we kind of have our Twitter just set to cross post. So if I post something on Instagram, it will also go up on Twitter. If I post something on Facebook, I could have it also go up on Twitter. But I'm not there, constantly updating my Twitter. It just doesn't make sense, because a lot of times people look at Twitter for updates, but most people are on Facebook or somewhere else, and they'll see that just the same. The other limitation with Twitter is, I believe it has a 120 character limit. I don't know if that's exact count, but it's something like that. It's very limited. And that's why if you ever see people on Twitter, they have to have like 5 different messages to get their whole sentence out, their whole message out, which it's not really conducive to spreading your message in most cases. And the other biggest pet peeve of mine about Twitter is you cannot post pictures. Any pictures that you post on Twitter just gets created as a link. And maybe I'm mistaken, but anytime that I've tried to do it, even when I cross post something from Instagram, it shows up on Twitter and it becomes a link. And, people have short attention spans. People have a lot of things going on. A lot of people are busy. So they just want to check out that picture. They don't want to have to click on a link to take them to another website to see what picture you posted. It's just not really, I don't know. It's not user friendly. So Instagram is much better for that. So if you have Twitter, great. If you don't, you can definitely set one up. I'm not saying don't have a Twitter, but Twitter is not what it used to be. And honestly, people don't really follow it nearly as much as they used to. An up and coming app is TikTok. And if you're familiar with Vine, TikTok is kind of like that. But honestly, if you're watching this video, then I think there's a fairly good chance that you don't know what Vine was. And that's okay. But basically, TikTok is an app where you could make short videos. I believe they're limited to about 10 seconds or so. So you're not going to post like a sermon or even your worship or anything. But you could post snippets. You could post clips of your worship, or just a couple words of a sermon. Or if you have a creative team or a drama department, you could even come up with like short 10-second skits or 10-second videos and post those up. And the more that you post of those, people will see them and they'll start seeing your page. And that's another way to reach more people. I will say I don't personally have a TikTok. I never used TikTok, but I am aware of it. And there are other people who have more experience and background with TikTok. Snapchat is another one. Snapchat, I don't think is going to be quite as effective as TikTok or Twitter, just because the way it works. But I know a lot of the younger kids, I'm not even that old, but a lot of kids in their teens or 20s are still on Snapchat, and that allows you to post text messages or text messages, literally text messages, texts, video, pictures, you could do some polls if I'm not mistaken, things like that. But the way it is sent out is more so in a text message form. It's to individuals. So if they follow your Snapchat, then they could see all that, but it's not the most user-friendly in my opinion. It's not the most widespread. So I would say primarily you will definitely want to be on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. If you're on those three, you're in good shape. And if you have a website, great. If you don't, then you obviously want to be working on getting one. But if you don't have one, that's okay. You have Facebook and YouTube and Instagram to at least start your social media presence. One last note that I will make about social media platforms: if you haven't set them up already, most of them, if not all of them, give you an option to pick a username. And while it's not necessary on certain ones like Facebook, you don't have to have a username, but you can choose to have one. It does make it easier for people to find you. And Instagram, for example, will have at whatever your church is or your company is. For our business, it's at Remember When IC. So if possible, I would suggest that you keep that the same across multiple platforms. It may not always be possible. Something may be taken, or, it might be too long for a certain platform or something like that, but it's easier if it's all the same thing. So we rebranded recently and we changed everything to Remember When IC. So if you're on Twitter, Instagram, or our Facebook page, all I have to do is say, hey, our ice cream shop is Remember When IC. It makes it a lot more difficult if one is Remember When Ice Cream and then another one is at RW Ice Cream and then a third one is at Remember When IC. It's okay if it's that way, but it's not ideal. And you also have to think about, whenever you post online, or if you have a brochure, a postcard, something in print, anything like that, it's a lot easier just to say, hey, these are our social media platforms and this is our one username, and it will work for all three of those or four of those or whatever you're on. If you have something different for different ones, then you have to list it out for each different one. And again, that's not the end of the world. It's just something to consider if you haven't set up your usernames yet. If you already have set up your usernames, you definitely can change those. It's not hard to do. But you also want to realize that when you change that effectively is changing your web address. So it's not going to be, say, Facebook/Remember When Ice Cream. If you change it to Remember When IC, it becomes Facebook/Remember When IC. And it's important to know that, because if you're putting out any information, whether it's in print or you're sending out an email or anything, it's important to let people know that that has changed and to update that. Otherwise, people are going to be following a broken link and they're not going to find your page. They're going to find, an error message. So I hope you enjoyed this video. That's just a very, very basic rundown on some of the top social media platforms right now. If there are any apps or platforms that you aren't sure about that I didn't mention, feel free to drop a comment in the question or comment down below and, leave me a question. Let me know if there's something that I haven't covered. I'll try to cover it. I'll try to get an answer for you. And as I said earlier, I will be getting into these in depth, specifically in each one, and showing the pros and cons and some of the settings that you want to have set up and explaining how to use them effectively. So with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video and I'll catch you guys next time.